On a night when the snow swallowed the streets of Buffalo, two little girls stumbled upon a stranger lying face down in the storm. His breath was shallow, his lips nearly blue, and they thought he was just another man lost to the cold. But what they could never have known was that this broken figure in the snow was a powerful millionaire CEO, a man drowning in wealth yet starving for warmth and meaning. Their tiny mittened hands dialed 911, and in that simple act of kindness, a chain of events began that would forever change all of their lives. This isn't just a story about survival, it's a story about second chances, about family born not of blood but of compassion, and about how the smallest hearts can thaw even the coldest soul. Stay with us and subscribe to the Retold Stories for more unforgettable tales that stir the heart. The storm had swallowed Buffalo whole. Streets that only hours earlier had carried the sound of traffic and holiday shoppers were now muted under a thick quilt of snow. Lamps flickered like weary guardians, their glow smothered by the endless flurry. The air bit into skin with every gust, sharp enough to make even the strongest shiver. And somewhere in the midst of that storm walked Ethan Whitaker. Ethan was the kind of man whose name appeared in financial magazines and whose face was plastered across glossy covers, announcing new developments and record profits. A millionaire CEO with towers that pierced the sky, he looked every bit the image of success. But in that storm, alone and buttoned into a wool coat that did little to shield him from the cold, he looked like a man adrift. The overcoat could not block the truth gnawing at his chest. He had dismissed his driver that night, not because he could not afford comfort, but because comfort had grown unbearable. Silence was what he sought, or perhaps punishment. Each step cracked against the ice-crusted sidewalks, then vanished beneath the hush of the snow. Reflections of Christmas. Lights winked in darkened storefronts. Wreaths hung on doors mocked him with their suggestion of joy. He carried a penthouse key in his pocket, yet the thought of its marble floors and glass walls felt like shackles. Inside his head was a storm louder than the one outside. Board meetings, stockholders, endless questions from the press. All of it was just noise layered over a deeper silence. A voice that hissed, "You built everything, yet you have nothing." The snow grew heavier, coating his lashes, gathering in the folds of his trousers. Memories surfaced unbidden. An iron playground swing groaning in the wind. Nights spent hiding in foster homes that never wanted him. Hunger so sharp it twisted his stomach until he stole instant noodles from pantries. That playground he passed was no stranger, it was once his refuge when the world had discarded him. He hadn't thought of it in decades, yet it returned like a ghost. The dizziness came swiftly, cruelly. His chest seized, his hand reached for a lamppost that wasn't there. The world tilted, whitened, and then collapsed. He fell face first into the snow, its cold fingers seeping through coat, shirt, and skin. Panic dulled, replaced by a chilling thought. Maybe this is what I deserve. Across the street, two small figures trudged through the storm. Hazel and Harper Morgan, twin sisters just 6 years old, were wrapped in coats far too large and rain boots that leaked at the seams. Hazel clutched a paper bag with sandwiches. Harper carried a thermos of soup swaddled in a towel. They were on their way to see their mother at the clinic, battling the storm with the determination only children can carry. Hazel noticed him first, a shape in the snow that did not belong. She tugged her sister's sleeve. "There's someone there." Harper froze. Grandma's words echoed, "Don't talk to strangers." Her instinct was to go around, but Hazel didn't move. Something in her heart whispered otherwise. Not bravery, something gentler. She thought, if I were lying in the snow, I wouldn't want to be alone. Step by step, she approached. The man didn't stir. She knelt, knees sinking into the snowbank, and placed her mittened hand on his shoulder. "Sir," she whispered. Nothing. His lips were pale, his skin gray, his breath shallow. Panic fluttered in her chest. She fumbled with her backpack until she pulled out a scratched flip phone with a unicorn sticker. Grandma Betty had insisted it stay charged. Hazel's small voice trembled as she dialed. "My name is Hazel Morgan. I'm 6. There's a man in the snow by Elm Street School. He won't wake up. Harper hovered close, wide-eyed, clutching Hazel's arm. Snowflakes clung to the man's lashes. Hazel brushed them away gently, not sure why, except that it seemed kind. The dispatcher promised help was coming. The girls stayed. Time slowed until the flashing red lights broke through the blizzard. Paramedics rushed, wrapping the stranger in blankets, lifting him into the ambulance. Hazel thrust her bag into their hands. "In case he's hungry when he wakes up," she said. The EMT's eyes softened. "That's very kind of you." As the ambulance disappeared into the storm, Hazel whispered, "We found him." Harper frowned. Yeah, Hazel's brow furrowed, as though she carried a weight far older than her years. "I think he was supposed to be found." The snow buried their footprints quickly, but for a moment, it was proof that kindness had passed this way. When Ethan awoke, it was not in his penthouse, but in a small clinic room. The silence was different, not manufactured by soundproof walls, but filled with the gentle rustle of blankets, the shuffle of rubber soles, the hum of fluorescent lights. The warmth around him came not from expensive sheets, but wool blankets tucked with care. A nurse leaned over him, with tired but kind eyes. "Mr. Whitaker, you gave us quite a scare. 2 little girls found you, called 911, stayed with you until the ambulance came. You wouldn't be here without them." Ethan blinked at the ceiling, bewildered. 2 little girls. Why would anyone stop? In his world, people passed, even when you begged. Yet these children, strangers, had stayed. Their small act of kindness had cut through the blizzard of his life in a way no fortune ever had. And so began a story neither he nor the twins could have imagined. A story that would turn a night of despair into the first spark of something new. Ethan's first clear memory after waking in the clinic was the sound of quiet. Not the engineered quiet of his penthouse with double-paned glass muting the city, but a softer one. It carried the rustle of blankets, the distant hum of a heater fighting winter, the faint squeak of shoes on linoleum. He had been cocooned in an unfamiliar warmth. It unsettled him more than the storm. A nurse hovered nearby, clipboard in hand. She smiled with a trace of weariness. "Mr. Whitaker, you collapsed near the old school playground. 2 little girls found you." He struggled to sit up. "Girls?" "6 years old," she said gently. "They called 911 themselves. Stayed with you until the ambulance arrived. You wouldn't be here without them." The words clung to him like snowflakes that refused to melt. 2 children, too young to understand death, yet brave enough to stand against it. Why? His world had taught him that people looked away, that help came with conditions, but these girls had offered something he hadn't felt in years: unselfish concern. Later that afternoon, the clinic door creaked open and an older woman stepped inside, Betty Morgan. Her scarf was tied tightly beneath her chin, her coat dusted with snow. Her gaze was sharp, cautious, and it landed on Ethan like a challenge. "You must be their grandmother," he said, voice rough. "I am." She nodded curtly. "Hazel and Harper. They saved you. I owe them my life." His words were sincere. Betty's eyes narrowed. They were raised to help. But don't mistake kindness for invitation. We don't welcome strangers lightly. Ethan accepted the rebuke without protest. "I understand. I'm not here to intrude, only to say thank you." Her gaze didn't soften. "Are you a father?" He hesitated. "No." "Then maybe you won't understand why I'm careful." She turned to leave, but paused. "Their mother's here too, in the clinic. Has been in a coma for weeks. They still talk to her as if she hears them." The name hit Ethan like a gust of icy wind. Claire. His chest tightened. He remembered the syllables, like a secret long buried. When Betty led him down a dim hallway, the air smelled faintly of antiseptic and boiled coffee. The room they entered was small, its walls chipped, but it was alive with signs of love. Crayon drawings crowded the walls, a crocheted blanket draped across the bed, a snow globe on the nightstand. 2 girls perched on chairs beside the sleeping woman, their legs swinging. Hazel was the first to smile. "You're the snowman?" Harper tilted her head. "The one with the really cold face." A laugh threatened to escape his throat for the first time in months. "That's me. he admitted softly. "Thank you for stopping. You didn't have to." Hazel shrugged. "Grandma says we help. Even big people. Most people wouldn't, but we're not most people." Ethan turned toward the bed. Claire lay still, her face pale, lips dry. Yet something about her was familiar, a warmth he could almost touch. Memory struck him with brutal clarity. He was 17 again, cold and hungry, crouched outside Carmine's diner with nothing but an empty stomach and anger to keep him awake. A girl had stepped outside with a paper cup of soup and a sandwich wrapped in a napkin. Her coat was thin, patched at the elbows, yet she draped it around his shoulders without hesitation. "Don't be stupid." "It's freezing," she had said, her voice gentle but firm. That girl's name had been Claire. Ethan's knees nearly buckled. Fate had drawn him back to her. She had saved him once when he had nothing. Now, decades later, her daughters had done the same. That evening, in the clinic's lounge, Ethan sat hunched forward, hands clenched. The question circled him relentlessly. Why did they stop? He had wealth, influence, a name recognized in boardrooms, yet it was these children who had wrapped him in kindness as naturally as a scarf against the cold. When Betty allowed him into their apartment days later, his heart raced. The building was weary, its steps rusting, its hallway narrow. Inside, though, was a different world. Mismatched chairs crowded the kitchen. Paper snowflakes dangled from strings. The smell of bread baking filled the air. Hazel's laughter ricocheted off the walls like bells. Harper studied him with wary curiosity before announcing, "If you brought food, you owe us cookies too." Ethan found himself smiling more easily than he had in years. They sat around a wobbly table, ladling stew into chipped bowls. Harper wiggled with delight at the sight of real potatoes. Hazel insisted he read from their tattered fairy tale book, giggling whenever his voices grew too ridiculous. For a man accustomed to sleek boardrooms and calculated conversations, this cluttered warmth felt almost sacred. Yet Betty's watchful eyes followed him. Later, when the girls brushed their teeth, she confronted him in the hall. "They're getting attached," she said flatly. "Don't make promises you won't keep." "I haven't promised anything," Ethan replied softly. "I'm just here. People like you don't usually stay," she muttered. He met her gaze. "People like me used to believe that too." Back in his penthouse that night, the silence pressed in heavier than ever. The skyline glittered outside, empty and soulless. For the first time in years, he didn't reach for his phone or chase the next deal. Instead, he remembered Hazel's small hand brushing snowflakes from his lashes. He remembered Claire's coat wrapped around him decades ago. And something deep inside him, long frozen, began to stir. The next morning, Ethan called his assistant. "Find everything you can about the Morgans. Medical records, school, anything public." Hours later, he scrolled through the information. Claire Morgan, 39, waitress. Medical file, coma, complications from pneumonia, emergency contacts, Betty Morgan, children, Hazel and Harper. His chest tightened as his eyes caught a signature scrawled in faded ink. Claire Morgan. He whispered her name like a prayer. She had saved him once without even knowing his story. Now her daughters had saved him again. And for the first time in decades, Ethan felt a pull, stronger than ambition. He wanted to stay. He needed to give back what he had been given. The storm outside thickened, but inside Ethan Whitaker's heart, the ice had begun to melt. Snow still blanketed Buffalo like a restless tide, but inside Ethan Whitaker, something had shifted. The man who once measured worth in skyscrapers and market value now found himself spending mornings in a modest apartment, juggling math flashcards with two little girls who insisted they could teach him better than any tutor. Hazel sat cross-legged, her curls spilling over a yellow headband, pointing to numbers with serious authority. 4 times 6, 24, Ethan guessed, trying to sound confident. Harper rolled her eyes with exaggerated flair. "You need tutoring too," she scolded, giggling until her sister joined in. Ethan laughed with them, a laugh that felt unguarded, unpracticed, almost foreign to his own ears. Nights became dinners at the Morgans' cramped table, mismatched bowls steaming with stew, Betty supervising with sharp eyes that slowly softened. Hazel leaned her head against Ethan's arm during Coco, whispering, "Grandma says this makes your heart warmer." Harper nodded solemnly, as if delivering scientific proof. Ethan stared at the chipped mug in his hand and thought, then this must be working. But behind the warmth was Claire. She remained still, silent, her body tethered to machines that hummed like tired lullabies. Ethan sat by her bed for hours, reading stories her daughters adored, his voice shaky at first, then steadier with each page. Sometimes he just watched, remembering the girl who once handed him soup on a freezing night when no one else had noticed his existence. One morning, Hazel brushed her tiny palm across her mother's hand. Ethan saw Claire's fingers twitch. Later, she drew a deeper breath. The doctor didn't promise miracles, but hope had returned like a fragile flame. Ethan stayed longer, his tie loosened, hair mussed, a forgotten cup of coffee cooling in his grasp. Betty caught him once, half asleep in the chair beside Claire's bed. "Planning on renting that chair?" she asked dryly. "I knew her," Ethan confessed, rubbing his hands together as though the truth needed warmth. 22 years ago, I was just a boy, homeless, hungry. She gave me her coat, half a sandwich. No judgment, just kindness." Betty's guarded shoulders sagged slightly. "She never told me. But that sounds like Claire." He smiled faintly. "I didn't even say thank you. Do you think this is fate? I think it's a second chance." From then on, Betty didn't stop him when he brought groceries or a space heater. She didn't chase him away when Hazel showed him crayon drawings labeled "Our Team." She only watched with a kind of quiet testing, waiting to see if he would stay, and Ethan stayed. The boardroom noticed his absence. Phone calls piled up. His assistant whispered that the directors were restless. But Ethan's world had narrowed to the smell of baking bread, the laughter of girls arguing about fairy tales, the quiet hum of Claire's breathing. The skyscrapers outside seemed less important than the warmth inside a small, cluttered home. When the board demanded an emergency meeting, Ethan returned, standing before polished glass walls and men in pressed suits. But his voice no longer carried the clipped rhythm of profit margins. It carried something deeper. "I built towers for people I'd never meet," he said. "I thought success was steel and glass, but one morning I woke up in the snow, alone. Except I wasn't. 2 little girls saved me. They didn't know my name. They didn't care. They just saw someone who needed help. That's the kind of legacy worth building. Not taller buildings, not bigger profits. Something that lasts because it is human." Gasps rippled when he declared he was stepping down as CEO. Some protested, but Ethan's tone held no regret. Peace filled his words. That afternoon, he signed away the company, selling his penthouse to fund the Claire Morgan Foundation, an organization dedicated to children and families on the edge, people like the boy he once was. Life didn't become perfect overnight. Reporters stalked the Morgans' new home. Betty twisted her ankle. Claire's recovery moved slowly, with halting words and weary smiles. But through each storm, Ethan stayed. He read bedtime stories, burned pancakes, stumbled through multiplication tables. Hazel and Harper teased him mercilessly, nicknaming him Mr. E, and Harper once declared, "Some angels wear suits." That line stuck with him. It wasn't about wealth or image. It was about choosing to stay when it mattered most. When Claire finally whispered her first word, home, Ethan's chest tightened. He had bought countless properties, yet none had carried that weight. Together they moved into a modest house with yellow shutters, bunk beds for the girls, a reading nook Ethan built himself, after watching tutorials and bruising his hands. It wasn't flawless, but it was theirs. On Christmas morning, beneath a lopsided tree strung with mismatched lights, Hazel and Harper gave him a gift wrapped in newspaper comics. Inside was a collage, Hazel's original drawing of him in the snow, photos of him at the clinic, with the girls, with Claire, with Betty. At the bottom, in shaky handwriting, were the words, "Thank you for coming back." Ethan held it like it was more precious than any contract he had ever signed. Betty touched his arm quietly. "I thought we were broken. Maybe we were just waiting to be whole." Later that day, Claire asked him to walk with her. They stopped at the very spot where he had collapsed weeks before. Ethan knelt in the snow, his gloved hand pressed against the cold ground. This is where I woke up. Not just my body, my whole life. Claire took his hand. Behind them, Hazel and Harper came running, laughter scattering through the storm. Betty followed, bundled and smiling faintly. Together, they stood there, 5 figures stitched into one family. Ethan looked at them at Claire's steady eyes, Betty's quiet strength, Hazel's wonder, Harper's fearless grin, and felt a truth settle into his bones. You didn't just save my life, he whispered. You gave it back to me. Claire squeezed his hand gently. Welcome home, Ethan. For the first time in his life, he believed it. There are moments in life when the cold feels endless. For Ethan Whitaker, the blizzard that swallowed Buffalo was not only a storm of snow, but a storm of the soul. He was a man who had everything money could buy, yet nothing that truly mattered. When he collapsed into the snow, he believed it was the end, an end he almost welcomed. But destiny, or perhaps something gentler, had different plans. 2 little girls with coats too big for their shoulders and hearts larger than the world stopped. They did not know his name. They did not know he was a CEO. They did not care. They simply saw a man in need and chose kindness. That choice became the thread that stitched together a broken life, a broken family, and a broken man into something whole again. Ethan's story reminds us that sometimes the smallest hands can carry the greatest strength. A child's instinct to stay, a grandmother's watchful protection, a mother's silent resilience, all of it combined to draw him back from the edge. It was not wealth that saved him. It was compassion. It was the belief that even strangers deserve to be cared for. When Claire opened her eyes after weeks in a coma, it was as if the circle had closed. Years ago, she had given warmth to a boy who had nothing. Now her children had given warmth to the man he became. That spark of kindness rippled outward. Ethan walked away from towering glass walls and into a modest home where burnt pancakes and bedtime stories carried more weight than any corporate victory ever could. What makes this story unforgettable is not that a millionaire changed his life. It is that 2 children proved that love, loyalty, and kindness are never too small to matter. They reminded us all that family is not just the people we are born to. It is the people who choose to stay, to hold us when we are falling, to stand with us when storms rage. And perhaps that is the lesson worth carrying beyond this tale. No amount of power or money can replace the warmth of being truly seen, truly loved. Success is not the skyline you build, but the lives you touch. The people who can look at you and say, you stayed. If this story touched your heart, let it be more than just a tale you heard tonight. Let it be a reminder that your kindness might be the spark in someone else's storm. And if you believe in the power of stories like this, stories that remind us of our shared humanity, then join us. Subscribe to the Retold Stories and become part of a community that believes in second chances, in unexpected families, and in the hope that compassion can change everything. Because sometimes angels do not have wings. Sometimes angels wear suits.